good afternoon, and welcome to Political No Brainer, the podcast where we move past winner takes all politics and into real conversations. I'm Jeff Rabinowitz, and this season we're bringing in voices from all sides to challenge assumptions, bridge divides, and build a better understanding of today's biggest issues. And today I'm joined with Lisa Rivera, a good friend of mine. We've both experienced life in sort of similar ways, really. That's something I want to bring out is how we grow into being adults, and a big part of that is our K through 12 education system. A big part of that is our parenting. But, something interesting I read Warren Buffett once wrote that the reason there's such a growing divide between rich and poor is because life has gotten more complicated. So, in his assertion, 300 years ago, everybody was a farmer and everybody had equal skills and equal opportunities to succeed. Now that we've grown into this world of AI and we've grown into this world of enormous technology and this world of extremely competitive corporate America, a lot of people are not getting to where they want to be ultimately. A lot of people, there's a lot of frustration. Um, Anthony Bourdain, a restaurant critic, someone I think a lot of people have followed, talked about young people finding their young misfits finding their way in the restaurant business, and that's a good thing. I found my way in the restaurant business. I enjoyed all my years in the restaurant business. I've experienced numerous positions and numerous companies, and grew as a human being, as grew as a person, a productive person. But my question has always been, how do we improve our K through 12 education system to set up kids for success, to prepare kids for this more difficult world that Warren Buffett seems to allude to, that and sort of says, I don't think he has the answer when he says that. All he says is that's why the chasm is there. That's why the growing divide between rich and poor is there. So I got my good friend Lisi, and I'd like you to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, initially when you said that, I was thinking like education in the United States, should it be based off state control or is that something that should be universal across the whole country? I mean, obviously, each state has their own history that can be implemented into education, but should we have the same standard across the board more in terms of, the same education in California you're going to get in, Wisconsin, you're going to get in North Carolina, you're going to get in Maine, based off grades. I know they have state tests and things like that, but where's the standard like in general to get your diploma GED?
Well, that's a great question. So apparently we are questioning and answering that question at the moment. I think we know the president in charge at the moment is talking about taking down the Department of Education. Now, one of the and I call it the wrecking ball effect. I don't know if he has a plan, but the idea is that you're going to take down this centralized governing body for education. You're going to give the states control, and then the states are gonna I guess in a sense take that control and utilize it better. I guess you're dividing the challenge into 50 ways rather than one department in Washington D.C. And like you said, there is these standardized testing. There's these incentives for teachers to see to it that their students do well in these standardized testing. And then there comes the question of teaching to test. Are the teachers teaching kids to test? So ultimately, the results in those tests are enormously better, and then they get paid their bonuses. So the bonuses is a big question too, because I do think these teachers deserve more money,
Oh
significantly more
yeah.
money. But is the bonus really the way to go, or should we just pay teachers more and then with that increased salary attract really good candidates to be teachers?
Yeah,
So
because with teachers, like it seems like there is more responsibility on them to teach than it was even 10, 15 years ago. And the classroom sizes, each kid coming in with their own learning style or maybe like needing more attention than others. And it's very difficult. I mean, at least for me, my parents emphasized education. So they were very involved in the process of what my homework was, what I should be doing, like, being on top of things. But the way of living has completely changed where, even now there's more emphasis on technology and individualism than, the community group and the, being involved. And a lot of parents feel like the teacher should be, doing more or doing less but not investing in the education of their kids unless there is a I don't want to say income discrepancy, because typically, like if you can afford tutors and the extra, lessons and things like that, your child's going to have a better education, better outcome. It really does matter, unfortunately.
Right.
So,
And then there's the big question, can you afford tutors? There's all sorts of tutors. There's all sorts of national chains that are tutoring students. And but what if you can't afford tutors? What if your kids really are going to school and you're
yeah,
the parent that's just getting them there and racing to your next task, being work? And that child is then somehow taking a bus home and home alone from 3 to till you get home. And then the question is, do they have any mentoring at that point? Are they home alone till who knows what time? Is there dinner there? Because there's even the question of food insecurity. And I've always made the point that the more we invest in education, the more the return on investment will be bigger and bigger and bigger. So what I'm saying is, if we invest significantly more, the return on investment, the percentages will grow. Because when you cover all the gray areas that are simply not covered at this point, when you cover the food insecurity, when you cover the mentoring, when you cover the tutoring, when you really take the time to teach children how to grow as human beings, not just teach them a curriculum that's been designed 50 years ago, reading, writing, and arithmetic, which is important. But again, like I said, we're coming down to the time, day, and age, according to even Warren Buffett, one of the most successful investors in the world, who says life has gotten more complicated. And what we're finding is that children of affluent homes are really succeeding, and children of not necessarily even affluent homes, but homes that are
lower
being
income.
abandoned are, of course, missing the boat.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because it also kind of comes down to values, because some people think that the job of teachers is to teach, and so they don't need to do anything extra, because it's like, well, that's what they go to school for, is to learn and teach. I shouldn't have to be adding on to that, and unfortunately, that doesn't yield very good success, or basic discipline or anything of the sort, in terms of studying and developing habits and redundancy. But yeah, like it's
So,
kind of like the discrepancy just keeps growing because of access.
right. And one of the things I said, when you say value, and this is where I always say, if we don't, when it comes to education, we need to try new things. If we don't fail, if we don't have epic fails, if we don't have false starts, we're not swinging the bat hard enough. So the other day, as a podcaster, I visited the Wild Horse Rescue in Webster, Florida. The owner's name is Diane Delano. The visit, the podcast was amazing, and we talked about the education piece that she does. She has an education center. It's got books. It's got different pieces of literature. It's got pictures. It's got different and then we also rode around on a golf cart where we took care of the animals. We fed all the different animals. And so there was horses, there was pigs, there was dogs. There was a dog that couldn't be out and about amongst other dogs, but he had this great secluded area. He had been tortured as a younger dog, and he could no longer relate to anything. He only knew abuse. So when he would get involved with another dog, he would be very abusive. So he had his own area, and he had to be fed separately. But he was okay. He was happy with his life now. He was at peace. But so, and the reason I point that out as well is because if we understood what our community offered, if we understood all the incredible people that are doing all the incredible things in our community, and we made that a part of our education system, not just one field trip every 3 months where the kids go to Universal Studios, but if we made it a routine where they go to places like the Wild Horse Rescue, where they go to places like the Humane Society, where they help take care, they'll understand caretaking. They won't
Yeah,
necessarily think caretaking is the next step in life, to have a baby and not even know what's involved with that. They'll
yeah,
understand that, and that's where you get into the value thing, where you get young people are having children and aren't even able to afford a place of their own.
yeah. And then also not being able to have basic life skills on top of that, because it's not something that they put manual like labor into learning or even was taught.
No, and they took away all the BOCES. I don't see that anymore. Where you could learn to be an electrician, or you could, and I've even said not only learn to be an electrician, let's include in our education experience to be an electrician, experience to be a carpenter. Where you,
Yeah,
why go to BOCES to be an electrician and realize you don't like electrician, or you're not, some things you're just not able to grasp.
yeah,
Being an electrician is very technical.
yeah.
First experience it with work with local companies if that's your path, you know. So I don't know how you and your school experience. Did you experience BOCES or anything like that?
No, I mean, with my school, I did have a home economics class. I took a class on car care, where like I learned to change oil and change a tire. Kind of didn't retain that info, but I had different skill set classes. Swim was also another one, just to kind of build a balanced, um, not curriculum, but uh, to complement the educational like
Right,
classes. So like that was a really good opportunity for sure because in home economics we learned how to cook, sew and cook a couple things and just a couple like around the house, like, and that was for both guys and girls. There was just a home economics class on like basic household things, um, and little hacks and whatnot. And I think that was great, especially as a middle school and high schooler having that opportunity. Those aren't available anymore. From what I learned, that those usually got the cuts first when they started, taking the budget. But those type of opportunities gave more development to the students, almost more than the actual education of learning Pythagorean's theorem. Oh, excuse me,
right,
Pythagorean theorem. Yeah,
right. And I'm not knocking the idea of learning Pythagorean's theory. I'm not knocking, Warren Buffett. Again, I refer to him. He's sort of the centerpiece of world economics anymore. When you think of anything as far as economics, somehow you revolve back you come back to him somehow. But he talks about communication being the centerpiece of life. Like he says, if you wink at a cute girl in a dark room, you're not communicating. Communication, teaching kids how to communicate. I know for a fact a lot of people have succeeded in corporate America simply because they know how to communicate, because they know how to email, because they know how to impress people when they make a point. And that may be getting semi replaced with AI. I know I sometimes try to structure an email, and AI is the first place I go. So that may be getting somewhat replaced. But for the longest time, but communication, that personal skill, one on one communication, we're not teaching that in school. Something you said about cars. I came to the realization more than ever that not only being able to change your own oil or change your own tire, understanding the expense of a car is an important part and a significantly important piece of life. So we live in Florida, one of the most auto-intensive states in the country. And there was this story. So I'm gonna kind of go off into a segue here. There
go
was this
ahead.
story. There was this restaurant that was around for 50 years, and suddenly they just had to close their doors. It wasn't because of the lack of business. It was because they had nobody wanted. They said nobody wanted to work anymore. That's not what happened.
Yeah, it probably sounds like a horrible work environment.
It's a horrible work environment, but also what happened in this particular restaurant, I won't say the name of the restaurant. If you looked across the street from the main road, you looked across the street, they were on this busy road. You would see these amazing restaurant chains opening up all over the place. So the kids would wind up in those chains where the opportunity to grow at the company, where the 401ks were, where the paid vacations were, where the health insurance were,
More benefits.
where the benefits were. So my point to that is where I'm landing with that is owning a car is a vital piece of having a good job. You've got to be, you can't work from across, if all you can do is ride your bike across the street to your work, you're going to wind up in a place you don't really particularly care for. If you have the whole, if you have the whole radius around you within 40, 50 miles, you can wind up in one of the most beautiful theme parks in the world, working, growing with the
Yeah,
company, meeting hundreds of new friends every day, experiencing what work events they have to offer for the employees.
and
And
being
I'm
able to
not
transfer
knocking
and network.
yeah, and I'm not knocking the individual owners that are, the individual food trucks and stuff. But if you're literally riding your bike to a food truck nearby your house because that's the only place you can get to every day, promptly, and you're getting into this metal truck and you're working your butt off in a small condensed area, you're not going to love your job.
Unless you're the owner of that food truck.
Unless you're the owner of that food truck, right? And then, and so my point is that all these things, owning a car, buying a car, financing a car, understanding what are you not only making the payment, you have now the insurance. The insurance is higher on a new car than it would be on an older rundown car, but an older rundown car has the expense of constantly trying to keep it running versus the payment where you've got a car that runs. And
Yeah.
we're not teaching any of that to kids. What kids are doing today is they're leaving school and they're facing life. And they're leaving school. So I used to work a manager, like I said, in many restaurants. I used to work for a restaurant chain. You go to many locations, and a young person that works hard in a restaurant would get promoted to bartender, and that young
Yeah.
person, boy or girl, would say, I'm making, I'm buying this new car. I can make the payment on Fridays, just my money from Friday nights. And I'm saying, well, what are you doing with that money from Friday nights right now? Are you paying your rent with that money? Do you understand that? Yeah, you're doing better, but do you really have an understanding of how much that new car cost? Are you really able? It's not. I'm not saying you're not able to afford it. Do you have a plan to continuously afford it for the next 60 payments?
Yeah, we have become a culture of instant gratification without long-term plans.
Right. And how do
Yeah.
but is that how you experience life, or do you always think your next steps through?
It's like 50-50 because, it depends on if I have a goal or like an objective in mind. But, we as a culture have shifted to convenience and instant gratification over long-term investment and kind of letting things build. I guess the best example I could use would be kind of like, social media. People, like with your podcast, you plan things out and you have like a objective of what you want to present. But for some people, it's just kind of like, I just want attention, so I'm going to post a picture of myself a certain way. But there's no long term goal as to what they want from that. They just want that attention for the day, chasing likes, kind of a thing. Or even with, like you said, the bartending. He's like, or the person, they're like, oh, I'm going to go based off Friday nights. But what's your goal in terms of what you're going to make? What if you get sick and you're off for Friday? Do you have a savings? Like, do you have an idea of what is required behind accomplishing that goal of just using Friday nights to pay your car? Do you have a fund for your car if anything happens or occurs? Getting brakes, new tires, or something happens with your key and you need a new key. And so yeah, that's the instant gratification. Like, I want the car, but I'm not thinking about the long term of like, okay, I have payments for the next 5 years. I need insurance. I need to make sure I have enough to cover any like extras.
Right. So remember, and it's just a great example. I mean, the key alone is a great example of how life has gotten more complicated. I know for a fact I have a chip key. And I've dropped it on the ground numerous times. I'm always getting home late at night, grabbing all sorts of things out of the car, drop the key. Suddenly the key doesn't work. It wasn't like going to Home Depot 20 years ago and $1.75 you had a replacement key. I mean, I was literally negotiating between the dealership and a place in Leesburg for a chip key. The dealership was around $375. The place in Leesburg was $175. So
Yeah.
suddenly even that has gotten to the point where you've got to have savings. What happens if a young person doesn't have a money for a new chip key, doesn't and misses work for 3 days, trying to wait for his or her mom to Zelle her money to and yeah, I've seen that, and so often in young people, especially, and even older people now, they have no plan. The old saying goes,
Yeah.
you don't plan to fail, or you don't. If people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan.
Yeah, and it only
Life is
takes one
complicated.
illness, one car accident, one job loss, one, I don't want to say mental breakdown, but one breakup even, like that can set you back so far. I think we all have know somebody who, went through a scenario, maybe leaving an abusive relationship or maybe just unexpectedly getting fired or, something happening, but the money consistency is gone and, they're getting evicted, they're homeless, they got their car repoed, like all these chain effects happen just from one event that you did not expect to impact your life in such a significant way.
Right. And we see these people stop showing up at work. We like, oh yeah, he's out and about partying. No, he, like you said, no, he's had a devastating family news. He's had a breakup. He's had an expensive situation come up, and it just shuts down his day to day routine. It just, and it sets him back. And my biggest concern is it's happening more and more and more often. And I you know I look at it as almost like a deep state referendum, or I look at it as like a built-in agenda for the very wealthy. They seem to be seizing the opportunities, the big corporations and the wealthier. And housing's a crisis. And I'm looking at an investor like investors who own hundreds of homes. Recently, I have a small business. Recently, I just ran into a lady. She's been renting her same home for 10 years. The person who owns her home and about another 100 rentals is a doctor. He's getting very old, and his spouse doesn't want to be the proprietor of 100 rental properties. So they're ultimately looking at an investment company to just buy everything. So take some time to come to this agreement. But he told her, when this investment company takes over our properties, your rent is going to go up significantly. I have not been charging you what I should be charging you. You're at $1,300 a month. This investment company is looking to buy this house and raise this rent to 1,900 the first year, 2,200 the next year. She's like,
Yep.
I can't afford 1,900. I can't afford 2,200. I can't even afford the $50 he would have raised it if he kept ownership.
Yeah.
And so then you wind up with this. I'm calling it deep state, but you wind up with this big business agenda. Some investment, whether it's a private investor or it's an investment firm, is buying up 100 homes, and they're going to increase the rents and the value significantly in their first 2 years of ownership. But 100 people potentially are going to wind up homeless. They're going to
Yeah.
wind up in a situation.
Properties for profit versus the people for, helping them out and, just basic, resources. And that's
Right.
also the thing. The access to resources and support are really detrimental to being able to get through, setbacks and crisis. And not a lot of people have that because they're too trying to catch up on their own thing, that they can't be able to, band together and be a community type of thing. And that's also the downside of not being, more group minded or kind of caring about your fellow person. There's not enough support and resources to go around.
So there is that lack of empathy. There is that lack of understanding. I say MAGA, make America gracious again. I don't see that happening. I don't see make America gracious again being a big, huge movement anymore. I
Yeah.
think America's changing in a way. I don't know if it's for the better or for worse, but it's changing. I did see that, there was the New Deal and 50 years of expanding the New Deal. Year after year we expanded the New Deal. Now there's this grievance politics. You've expanded it too far. You've expanded it too often. And now we're taking everything back. And how many people are going to wind up with things they desperately needed that they're going to wind up not even overnight they're not going to receive. And
I
we're
yeah. Oh, sorry. Go
no, go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I was just thinking about how, we've come to a culture of self, and competitiveness, but not being looking at the overall picture. I remember this story I read about this professor who was giving the final exam to his class, and he says, "I'm going to give you two options. So we can get everyone can get an A. I'll give you a 95% score. The only stipulation is that everybody has to agree. Otherwise, we're going to take the exam and you get what you get." And so, what do you think happened?
My guess is everybody did not agree because generally everybody does not agree.
Yes. So they had to take the exam because everybody but 4 to 6 people of this, like 50 people in the class, like 4 or 6 of them disagreed. So they all had to take it. And then when they pulled them aside and asked them why they decided to not go for the 95%, they said, "Well, I don't want somebody doing as well as me and they didn't do the work. I don't want somebody else getting over when I studied whatever." And ironically, every time the professor proposes this, nobody has ever voted to give everybody a 95s. And of the class, maybe 1 or 2 people wind up with a 95.
Right. And that's what's happening today. Generally speaking, that's
Self-sabotage because you're
right.
concerned about somebody else's business.
That's really what's happening today because the wrecking ball is coming through rapidly. Programs are getting shut down rapidly. We don't even know. There was even talk about one of the pieces of one of the movements, one of the pieces of the new initiative is to shut down the phone systems at Social Security. So you've got elderly people eligible for Social Security. You're not taking away the Social Security program. You're taking away one piece of it, the phone system. And
Yeah.
everybody's arguing this is the elderly people have to be able to call and they're not going to be able to navigate the computer. So the computer has become websites have become a vital piece of companies saving money. So for
Yes, and
example,
apps are just too much with the apps.
apps,
So overwhelming.
websites. You used to be able to call somebody and they would literally punch in every piece of information for you. They start with your name, your address, your phone. Now you're doing that. You're doing all that. So that person that was getting paid $15 an hour to do it, they no longer do that. You're doing it. So it's free to that company. Then you're going down the websites everybody says they're easy to use. And there used to be, and they're not easy to use. I'm not a IT guy, but there's 1,000 options. You click on something that leads you down a road that you weren't even looking for. You can't get back to where you were.
Yeah, you have
And
to learn the lingo and the consistency, knowing that like you have to scroll all the way to the bottom to get to the contact us or get to this. Not everybody knows that. Or,
no,
making sure that red X is, gonna close out green. It's just you have to really know the inside, formatting. And not everybody has that, you know, mindfulness to remember that. Like,
or
oh
even
yeah,
like you think you get it all, but you don't scroll down and you don't accept the terms and conditions, and you think you're at a dead end. And that's some elderly people who just think they don't know to scroll all the way down to accept the terms and the conditions because that's a big part of it. You're accepting 9 pages of terms and conditions and you're not reading
ugh.
one word of them. But this is all a part of life today. And so, and my point has been that we even a part of our we should even as a part of teaching people responsibility or teaching people how to be more caring, teach kids how to help elderly people who are having this trouble. Not teach them how to work through the website, teach them how to be patient with the elderly people and volunteer their time here and there. Because volunteering is a big part of education now.
Yeah,
That piece is there.
that's
But
something I did that really helped me as a teen. I did tons of volunteering, and it helped me with networking and learning about social skills. And it was an excellent thing. And, like it's very important to have a hobby. A lot of people don't value that aspect. It doesn't have to be something you're good at, just something to occupy your time that you enjoy doing, because it really develops you as a person, supplemental to your self-esteem and your goals and things like that. It's, like people who are in sports, know how, like, like you lose, you win sometimes, because they're involved in an activity. And so the sedentary emphasis is really kind of taking away from that character development.
the
Education
video
cannot
games
be
and
about studying.
the video games and all that.
Yeah.
Kids are. I would love to see kids spend more time doing, like you said, hobbies other than going home and playing video games. I've also suggested that we encourage kids to learn more during their free time online, self enrichment courses versus video games. And I've said that these self enrichment courses, somehow, some way, I don't know how it would be paid for, either corporate or taxes, are incentive based. Really learn something important. Learn how to buy a house or learn how to invest. Learn the difference between a money market, an IRA, and an index fund. Really do this course online on your
Adult things
own
that you have to
time.
encounter as an adult. Yes. So
Yep.
basically trying to figure out where do we, put the studying and education and filter in life skills, character development, and, basic, willful roundfulness, because education is not about studying and passing tests. There's more to education than just books and learning. There's other aspects of learning that are just as vital in developing you into a functional adult. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And keep the education curriculum the way it is, because everybody says the teachers union is the strongest union in the world. It is. No one's saying change the education system. Make the extra time, the extra curriculum, in addition to the education system, as a part of, because kids are entering into this complicated world with, and I just see the sharks out there waiting to suck the life out of these new entries into this world economy, that they're going to make you work hard and you're going to get very little for it. And and the fact of the matter is, it's not a matter of another social program. There is a lot of opportunity. The fact of the matter is, it's about understanding how to seize that opportunity.
Yeah, that's my concern about the possibility of allowing kids to work more hours during school, possibly full time overnights. I think they were talking about as young as 14 now, is what they were.
14, that was Ron DeSantis' initiative to work overnights.
Yes. And so that's concerning because that is directly impacting education. And, sometimes it can be helpful for the family, the kid adding extra income or, helping to support the family, but that's an adult responsibility that you're putting pressure on a kid. And when kids get that access to money, eventually it just kind of takes over their interest in education, because they're going to want to, sometimes they may want to drop out of school to work more to get more money and not care about getting their diploma or anything else because they've got a job. So
Right.
it's not going to be favorable for the people who need the education.
No, it's not gonna. It's awful. I talked about that to somebody the other day about that initiative, and I guess somebody alluded to is to try to place some of the illegal workers to get
Yes,
young.
because they
That
did
was
lose
the
a lot.
that was the idea of it. That's a part of I call it a deep state initiative. We're not going to really say what our logic is or our agenda is. We're just going to say we're going to create this as an option.
Yeah, which is so ironic because, there was the whole emphasis of immigrants taking up and occupying all the jobs and, undervaluing their contribution. And now, oh, we actually need people to work that are willing to accept the low standards or the bare minimums that we're offering. Oh, we need people now. Let's get these teens. It's almost like the replacement for child labor. That was the replacement for slavery. Like, you're always going to need to, disenfranchise some group.
Right, or really, that's my idea is don't disenfranchise some group. Empower everybody with the knowledge they need to succeed, and then
Yeah.
make them realize you're in a place and time and a country where success is at your fingertips. But you don't see it because it is complicated, and you don't see it because you get out there to this vast world, you enter the workplace, and you're desperate to do something to survive. Whereas if, yeah, do something, Mark Cuban says if I had to start all over, if I lost all my money, I would get two jobs, one in sales and one in the restaurant business. The sales jobs would pay my bills, and the restaurant business, the tips, the bartending tips would enable me to save money to start a business. And and that's a great idea, but what happens when people generally have two jobs is they just have more to spend. But teaching kids how to start a business and understand what's a worthwhile business to start and really make it work and understand how much commitment it takes, that's a big part of the next where I want to go with our education
So
system.
adding more electives to education basically is what you're saying.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
making
we
those
don't have enough
electives.
electives. Like the swim class, like you mentioned, the emphasis on money markets and learning about functional things, the car classes, swim. Yeah, more electives would be better detrimental for the quality of education.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and making those electives, don't change the Monday through Friday 7:30 to 2:30 routine. Make those electives after school.
Or
And
even as part of requirement to graduate, like you're supposed to, we're required to take two electives a year or something like that.
right.
And like that is a lot that could be covered if you require it for grades, eighth through 12th.
And
That's
make education a more realistic approach. I have a good friend, Daryl Blackhall, who runs Orlando Workforce Academy, and it's an alternative to a high school degree, and it's got an
Okay.
AB schedule, and the AB schedule is some. Like he says, some of these students are the breadwinners of their homes. They can't make it to school from 9 to 3. So he's got an AB schedule on top of electives that you can earn credit, that you can earn the the credits you need to get your real high school degree, not your GED. And my whole feeling is we need to be more creative with our public education system and our charter education system. Private school is going to do their own thing, and generally speaking, private school is for the elite. So let them. They have their their bowl of rice. They know who they're attracting and who can afford them.
Yeah,
But
they get to pick who they want to
right,
be with their
and who can pay for
yikes.
it.
Yeah.
That's always been my big piece is how can we really make the best of our education system? And I haven't seen that at all. I have seen now, what I have seen and what is in play is, like you said, just taking down the whole system in Washington, taking down the national education department, and making it a 50 state initiative. So making the 50 states in charge of their own education system. That's
I actually think we need to have more of a more union. I don't want to say union, but more like, I don't want to say with the government, but having the states all have the same curriculum and the same kind of like baseline.
Well, that was what I thought was the Department of Education's job. But
Yeah,
I'm also hearing that they're also managing the 1.5 trillion dollars in student loans, which um, now they're going to throw it out to the Treasury Department. I'm not so sure the Treasury Department even can handle what they have on the books now, so I'm not so sure how that's going to go.
yeah, because I still have loans to pay off, and it's just even doing $50 a month is still like not really chipping away at the balance. It's unfortunate.
No, it makes no sense to me what's going on, and I'm trying to make sense of it. Like in a few weeks, we're gonna have some great. I'm gonna have a former, um, well, he's retiring this year from the Lake County School Board. Been on the board 14 years. The candidate that's gonna run for his position, one of the candidates gonna run for his position,
Okay.
and Daryl Blackhall, who runs the Orlando Workforce Academy. We're gonna talk about education. I'm gonna let them talk about education. And that's been so I go even a step further now because I say when you think of the Republican Party, they seem to have a good relationship with their voters. They seem to have a strong attachment to their voters. When you talk about the Democratic Party, they really don't have a close relationship with their voters. They
Well,
seem
the
to have
problem
a
is it's too many. I mean, they're basically a more open in terms of their views. I would say with the Republican Party, they're able to connect with their supporters because they have a very set criteria, set views. It's non, I don't want to say wiggle room, but it's very straightforward. We like this, we don't like this, we like this. Whereas with Democrats, they tend to want to be more appealing to mass people where they're like, well, we have this, but we have this, and balance and be able to include everybody. And unfortunately, it ends up polarizing the party because we have people who think this way and then people who think this way. And that's where the division in the party happens versus with the Republican Party, they have that I don't want to say fire under their butt, but they're like, we're all one team. We're going for the main goal. Everybody, this is tread forward. Because even with the election a couple of years ago with Bernie versus Joe versus like the trying to figure out who they want as their representative with them being having such vast different views. That
right.
was a big issue that really when Hillary ended up being the uh, election. People in the Democratic Party not wanting to support her.
And young people loved Bernie, but that's a great point. So I always say Republican Party has signature items, one or two pieces they really focus on, whereas the Democratic Party has like a list. I remember when there was a defense secretary, Robert Gates. He was actually George Bush's defense secretary. Then he stayed on with President Obama, but when he left office, he did sort of like an exit interview, like an op-ed, and he talked about all the presidents he worked for. And he basically worked for them all. Actually, the only president he didn't work for was Bill Clinton.
Okay.
And he talked about Jimmy Carter, and he said Jimmy Carter was a bright man, was a good president. The problem was he had too many priorities. And I said the whole Democratic Party has too many priorities. It's just this list, this enormous, voluminous list of priorities. Whereas the
Yes.
Republicans have a few pieces they basically work on, and they really relate to a big base of voters, and they generally win. And I've argued that point so many times with Democrats when I meet with them, because I meet with people, I talk to people on the phone, I email all day, and I've been always saying, if for crying out loud, if the Democrats would just make education their one signature item, their one piece, they would relate to so many people and win so many more elections. They don't have one piece. You've got
But I
Bernie
feel the problem
Sanders.
is, sorry, with Democrats, they see that there's a correlation between so many things that it all relates together. So yeah, they would talk about education, but then they're going to go into the discrepancies of poverty and income, minimum wage, or discrimination. They all see everything as a relative versus the Republicans. It's like, this is our opinion on this. This is what it is, and not really delving into the context, I guess I would say. And then
Yeah.
also, Republicans are unapologetic and not afraid to really just, I don't want to say be assholes, but they're not afraid to just, be assertive and just like, we're doing this, whatever. Whereas Democrats like, well, we kind of don't like this, and that's not nice, or like we want to have more of a, moral ground, yada yada. And I'm not saying Republicans are immoral. That's not what I mean. But I just mean that, like, for example, with like Al Franken being asked to step down over like a controversy that really didn't have much backbone to it, they're like, oh, this is embarrassing, versus many scandals that occur within the other party, or even just, the double standards that of like with picking the Supreme Court justices, unapologetically, they're like, yeah, we're gonna pick, somebody to replace Ruth, but you couldn't pick Merrick Garland or Merrick, back when he had the chance because it was an election year. But this time, actually, we need to do it right now. Do you see like how the
Right. They
playing by the rules versus making your own and trotting forward unapologetically? Ask for
right.
forgiveness versus, or better to ask for forgiveness than permission, kind of thing.
Yeah. And they do I do agree with you on every point that they're not bold enough. They're not bold enough. They're not, and that's the thing about Donald Trump is we keep I mean, that's one thing Democrats are focused on, knocking the guy for everything he does. But there's people who are saying, whether they like what he's doing or not, whether they're terrified of what he's doing or not,
Mm-hmm.
there's people that are saying at least he's doing something. There is literally people say, whereas the Democrats continuously just beat the point to death that what he's doing is wrong.
Yes.
And it's
But no
true.
action to,
But
go
what
against him
is
to,
right? What are
yeah.
we going to do that's right? Not necessarily spend another 4 years focusing on what he's doing. We're literally now on the topic of, is he going to run for a third term? And
Ooh.
and no, I know, but why are we on that topic?
Because
Why
it's a possibility, knowing that if that's what he wants, he's going to put it in place. The problem is they keep talking about it like it could be an issue versus trying to get behind the ball and be like, you know what, to prevent this from happening, this is what we need to do, and this is what we're going to do, versus like, oh, he could possibly run for third. He's talking about it. He could be doing it. Could be doing it. Versus him being like, oh, yeah, I'm going to run for third term, and this is what I'm going to sign off on.
Well, you
What?
know the best way to knock the idea of him running for a third term is create something that people like more than him than the crap he's doing. And
That and making sure he cannot legislatively get that done.
well,
You
they
have
said so.
you have the power to make the changes within your Congress and your House of Representatives, but all you're doing is just kind of like, whoa, wait, maybe, you're panicking, but no action.
Well, there was an initiative to put a piece on the House floor that said that he couldn't run for a third term, and Mike Johnson said, the Speaker of the House said, we're not even putting out. He does have the power to say a piece doesn't go on the floor for a vote. He does. The Speaker of the House has a lot of authority. But imagine if we actually focus on taking back the House. We're only 2-3 seats away. But how do we do that? And my question is, the way we do that. My answer is, the way we do that is we create something people really like a focus on education. We focused on healthcare, and we did well with it. the Affordable Care Act, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the greatest pieces of legislation ever passed. Yeah, I thought it should be called the Available Care Act. It literally made care available to everyone. It's
Yes.
not necessarily affordable, but literally, if you get a dire situation, you can go to your insurance agent, and your price is based on your age and your gender, not the fact that you have an awfully expensive condition. And that was a
Hmm.
big change. But what Democrats did, and I've said this over and over again, I've never seen it. They did really well, and it was kind of like a football team. They were the underdogs, and they won the game. And every Democrat player ran off the field saying, "It wasn't me. I didn't do it," because
But the thing is, it was the Republican proposal that got passed for the Affordable Care Act. It wasn't what Obama or the Democrats wanted.
no, but it was good. I mean, somehow they got it through.
Yeah, because Obama passed it because it was the only thing they were willing to approve or negotiate with. But it was not the original, it didn't have the original stipulations that Democrats and Obama wanted. They got gutted. And so to basically, like,
Right.
well, you know what? This is what you're proposing. I'm going to pass it, which is why Republicans are having a problem overturning the Care Act now, because that was what they created. They can't present something better because that's what they had put offers up.
Well, what
So
Democrats wanted was a buy into Medicare or a buy into Medicare. It was a buy into Medicare. What do they call it? Public option.
yeah, a
But they
couple
didn't
other
get
things.
it.
Yeah.
They didn't get it. But you know what? They got when you literally saw Republicans talk, when you saw Donald Trump's first term, him talking about taking a vote and overturning the Affordable Care, was millions of people rising up against the idea, and they failed. But we created an initiative. It was not perfect. Neither is the Donald Trump initiative. It's not perfect.
But he hasn't
But
presented anything
other than
privatizing
the
and
wrecking
getting rid of
ball,
things. Yeah.
right? But we could create an as a party, let's create something that people are that attached to again, an education movement or I'm not saying education's the only it's the only idea I think of. I think of a 24/7. We can do better with our education system. But there's 1,000 candidates out there, Democratic candidates that could be presenting great ideas and they're not. They're just
Well, the
talking
problem
about
is people are, it's almost like a popularity contest, because if you ask half the people that are voting, if you ask them who their their mayor is, council, they're not going to be able to tell you. They don't know. They only show up for every 4 years for the presidential, but they're not invested in local politics. And so that's why the ones that end up in the House and the Senate, they skirt on by instead of being, filtered out at the beginning, because they just make their way through with gimmicky, I would say gimmicky, attention seeking ideas. No
right.
substance. Yeah. So it's
No.
really it's really in a way our fault that this is why our politics are the way they are, because we don't start at the roots with the community and local state involvement.
Well, we don't. We don't at all. So another point I always make, and I've made it numerous times on this podcast, is that Obama had a great 8 years, but during that 8 years, we lost 1,000 seats in local elections all across the country because we don't
Show
cloverleaf.
up.
We don't
Yeah.
close. We. I just was reading some stats on some candidates across the country. Republicans won, and there was no opposition. There was nobody running for it. They ran unopposed in
Yeah.
numerous positions. And
Yeah.
now the idea is Democrats do have the initiative or the idea to put a person in every race across the country. They've talked to me. That's how we first talked before we even started recording about running for the school board. But I did my homework, and the school board really is all about numbers. It's not about curriculum. It's not about recreating our education system.
Yeah.
And numbers isn't really my thing. I'm not really looking to talk about annexing a piece of property at the cost of $1 million to expand a certain school. I'm not really worried about the building of the school, the buying of the land, where the money's going to come from. It's not really
But it
my
is
thing.
necessary to know if you want to continue with the emphasis of education, because you got
I
to
do,
be,
and I want to look
yeah.
more into it. But
Which school board would actually be a great place to start with that, actually, because you're kind of learning about the basics and the beginner, versus if you progress to a different position and not knowing, I would say, the basics of that, education about funding and things like that. It actually would probably go against you.
I would. I do need to know more about funding, and I do need to understand more about budgeting, and really to be more of a political. I don't always call myself a political activist. I call myself sort of more of a social entrepreneur, where I'm trying to create a momentum where we're really fixing things, where we're really getting things done,
Okay.
versus actually winning office. And then I see good people in politics get roped into the system. And I don't want to be one of them. I don't want to be a person on the phone 6 hours a day raising money for the next election. I want to be continuing to do what I do on this podcast, bringing ideas together, bringing candidates to this forum, and saying, what are you proposing? How are we going to do better? Not necessarily always Democratic candidates. There is great Republicans out there. There's there really is. I don't see it either, because all I see is what's happening, and
The
that's all.
extreme, the
Yeah,
extremists of the party on both sides.
but
Um,
there was a time and place, even during Ronald Reagan, they used to call them Reagan Democrats. We didn't always agree with them, but he communicated his position very well. He really was a uniter, whereas that's not happening today. I am, like I said, people are calling me. I say, if I had a million votes to cast, I would cast every one of them for Kamala Harris. I don't even know what kind of president she would be, but all I know is what's happening now.
yeah, is
And
what was predicted because of personal bias and whatnot. But then that also comes to the fact that, like, regardless of your stance on politics, a lot of people do agree on the same things, but they're not putting the action to implement it. Like how people complain about lobbying and how a lot of the politicians are doing things to serve them or keep us uninformed, or how I mean, I know they're talking about RFK and how he wants to make changes to food and whatnot, because a lot of us are like, wow, it's the food that's making us sick because of all these additives and all these chemicals and all this and whatnot. But we're not trying to push forward candidates that can really do stuff like that, or even like proposing that the Senate and members of the Congress make a certain wage across the board, because some of them are millionaires because of the lobbying and the backing and the fundraising, but they're not producing things that are beneficial to their constituents. But
right.
across the board, us regular schmegular people, we all tend to have the same idea, like, oh wow, they're selling us out to this, or oh, they're not in our best interest, and oh, we need to put term limits, or we need to do this, or these ideas, and they just kind of get lost because we get caught up in other social issues that are just kind of like, I don't want to say a flash in the pan, but just kind of like, oh, socialism. Oh, and I forgot what I was thinking about, or buzzwords, I would
Or
say.
third terms, or right, or
Or,
he's running for a
like,
third
oh,
term.
drag queens, transgender people, LGBT, DEI, or this and that. And, like, trying to emphasize that like, even with DEI, they're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but people are so focused on the D, excuse me, but, thinking that there's a certain, like, affiliation with Black people only for diversity versus gender diversity, or even like ableism. Equity, like making sure that everybody has the equal access to certain resources and trying to make sure there's a balance. Or even inclusion. Inclusion doesn't have to necessarily be, like a specific group or a hierarchy or anything like that. It's not a competition. It's really about harmony and trying to make sure we have a perspective of everybody when it comes to working a business or putting stuff forward. But people get so caught up in the, sensationalism of trendy words or like fear mongering that they forget the original things that are actually impacting us, like making sure they are putting in votes for changes to this, or term limits, or increasing minimum wage, or making sure everybody has access to food and proper education. We are such a sucker for sensationalism, and we bite the hand that feeds us.
We do, and DEI is a great word. So imagine, like you said, equity or inclusion. So DEI, a part of DEI is, if you look at a public transportation bus, there's
Mm-hmm.
bike racks on there now. Now, I was just talking about taking your bike to work. You can put your bike on a bike rack. That's a part of access. That's a part of DEI. What
Yeah.
DEI is important to Republicans is, and this is, again, I'm going back to Warren Buffett. So Warren Buffett bought bought Kraft, merged it with Heinz. And the idea of, because Kraft was just a company that had beat down for years, the idea was cut, 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 cut. We're going to cut so much, we're going to turn the company around. He joined forces with, so Kraft, he bought Kraft, and he joined forces with a Brazilian company, 3G. They do a thing called zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting means every department every year has to justify every expense. If they don't justify those expenses get eliminated. In governing, you can't justify expenses. A lot of what governing does is give things away. She can never justify the value of giving something away. So
Yeah.
Donald Trump initiated zero balance budgeting in the government by using DEI as the reason for it. If it is a part of DEI, it must be eliminated. So all DEI has done is given them an excuse to eliminate a lot of things. There is no justification.
Yeah.
It's and I've said that the whole homosexuality thing has nothing to do with governing. When you think of homosexuals in the military, which is essentially, I believe, how the Secretary of Defense got his job is by his opposition to homosexuality in the military.
Yeah.
Israel is one of the most effective armies in the world, and they're openly gay. You can
Yeah.
literally have blue hair and join the national security meeting if you have something to offer. They're not worried
Yeah.
about your sexuality. They're
And
worried
it's kind of
about is a
odd.
missile coming from Iran.
Yeah, and it's kind of odd because I thought the quintessential value or like strong point of the Republican value is the government not interfering with your personal life and your personal affairs. But,
Right.
it's kind of contradictory in that sense,
That was the conservative movement. No more regulation, which less government. And
Yeah.
under Trumpism, we have it seems like more regulation. I mean, can't even be and who cares if you're a homosexual? I don't understand the issue.
You're volunteering to do something I won't do. So, like if you want to do
What?
it, go ahead.
Love, I say love who you want to love. You want to love Donald Trump, love him. I
Yeah.
don't care. People say I have Trump derangement syndrome. I don't have Trump derangement syndrome. I have Trump supporter derangement syndrome. What is it you like about him so much? I don't understand. I understand he's doing things that you wanted to see done for 50 years, but he's doing them wrong. Is there any
Yeah.
is
It's
there
more like you
any
like his personality and the brazen way he comes off because you want to live vicariously through him without the, strict repercussions. Kind of like Teflon Man. It's kind of
like the
I feel like it's a
Teflon
common
Don?
sentiment. Like he says what he means. Well, he didn't mean that, but he's, talking out and he's saying this. He's doing whatever, you don't care. He's doing whatever. And I think it's just the personality appeal of the seemingly lack of accountability and consequences.
Right. And if we're up against that as a party, are we really going to defeat it by talking about what he's doing wrong when, in fact, like you said, he's remembered for the rules he's broken? He's
Yeah.
They like what he's doing wrong, and we
Yeah.
as
The only reason
Democrats
he
keep
loses
talking about what he's
supporters.
doing wrong. We
Yeah,
keep
because the only reason he
bolstering.
lost supporters is because they've been directly affected by his policies and behaviors. So it's not going to take us pointing out, like, oh, he did this wrong. It's literally like, I voted, like, a lot of people right now, I voted for him, and then he did something that actually directly impacts me. Like with the, like a lot of the Hispanic voters from Venezuela, Cuba, being sent, getting their green cards and immigration status revoked, even though they thought they would be exempt because they're not technically illegal. Or even the farmers that lost their contracts that they had with Biden, now not being able
They're
to
losing
support their
their
families.
farms.
Yes, and even with the government workers that were like, I signed up because he wanted to drain the swamp and make all these changes and eliminate waste and excess. I did not see myself as part of what he considered that. And so that's where he's losing the supporters, is with him following up on what he said he was going to do. So
Right, because
let him hang himself.
we don't let him. We keep
Yeah.
We're hanging ourselves with the rope we're trying to use on him. We keep beating the point to death that he's the bad guy, and
Yeah.
we're not presenting anything that makes us any better. People are more
Yeah. You're
concerned
whining,
about
but you have no action.
right,
Yeah. And
right.
that's what we're known for, is whining and complaining, but not doing, action or taking more steps. I mean, we can protest, which is fine, but now he's, trying to limit and restrict that because of the, dictator like belief, he's implementing. But, like there's not making, I don't know. I kind of got lost there. But it's, basically like, again, we're whining and not making any like progress through action or actual like tangible things that the everyday person can get on. There's
No.
nothing to go for. Like, oh, well, we don't
We
like
haven't
this.
proposed anything. We have
Yeah,
not proposed anything. We have not proposed anything constructive. We People are looking at what he's doing and saying, "Yeah, it's going to cost us dearly," but people are thinking ultimately the return is going to be huge. There's going to be some big dividend payoff. They talked about Elon Musk is going to send everybody a $5,000 check. I haven't even the whole Doge thing was a flop. I never talked about it because there was no point in talking. He said he
yeah,
eliminated an $8 billion ICE contract, and they're like, ICE has a total budget of $8 billion. You've eliminated an $8 million contract, and with all the penalties and all the fees of eliminating a contract because it is a contractual agreement, you've cost yourself money. So yeah,
yeah,
we made that point, and we made them look foolish, but they continued on their own agenda of we don't care if we look foolish.
yeah.
And I think we look foolish beating the horse to death about what they're doing wrong.
Yeah, because we have no action or no plan to combat it. And it's kind of ironic because when Obama was president, it was like, oh, he's not from America, he's African, and birtherism and this and that. And then all of a sudden, Elon buys his way into the country and is basically like the co-president, but he's from South Africa. No problem with that. But we want to make all these wild accusations about Obama, who's a U.S. citizen.
Well, if you're a successful businessman, there is a path to citizenship. It's not buying your way in, but if you do,
I
there
meant
is.
in terms of like Doge and his position in the presidency with currently. He's like a co-president
He
essentially.
is. He's getting on Air Force One. His son was picking his nose in the Oval Office while Trump was trying to speak. I
Yeah,
mean, I mean, and it is weird. I mean, but it's not my biggest issue. It's not my biggest concern. My biggest concern is bolstering the Democratic Party to
yeah,
some something worthwhile. I'm going to be a Democrat for as long as I can see because I know I'm not going to be a Republican as long as Donald Trump's a part of the equation. But why can't we do better is my question. Why can't we understand what we're doing wrong? Why can't we acknowledge what we're doing wrong? And it was literally Chuck Schumer said, if we let the government shut down, if I don't vote with Donald Trump will have more power. We will
yeah,
know Donald Trump will cede more power. And then you've got congresswomen like Andrea Ocasio-Cortez sending me texts. Should Schumer still be our leader in the Senate? Yeah, that's enough. There was a dire situation. He made a decision to. We don't want a government
we don't
shutdown.
want
Even
infighting. Yeah,
right. That's what are we going to do about winning the House back? Let's win the House back, and then we're in. Let's win the Senate back, and then we can't. Donald Trump can't even nominate another lunatic judge. I mean, there's a chance that a void may come up in the U.S. Supreme Court, and with 53 Senate seats in the Republican control, they can easily nominate another
yeah,
judge.
and yeah, because they're eyeing Sonia right now as like the one that
Because
may.
she has diabetes or something, and they're
Yes,
wondering if she's going to make it 4 more years. And it's not
yeah,
fair to ask this woman that question. She's like, they asked her to step down before Biden left office, and she was like, no.
yeah,
And
and like why aren't you looking at Thomas or any of the other judges that are older up there? Older than her
well,
even.
if
So,
Clarence Thomas were to step down or something, he felt like he couldn't do it no more. Trump would nominate and ultimately get confirmed another conservative.
yes,
Either I mean, so the issue is, will a liberal ultimately will the three liberals we have on the bench survive
the
Donald
four
Trump's
years.
4 years?
Yeah,
But it doesn't have to be 4 years. If we did a better job of presenting an agenda, we could take the Senate back. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but there's infighting within the Republican Party where they're saying if a Republican senator doesn't agree with Trump, then
then
Elon Musk will primary him, will fund his opponent in the primaries.
and kick him out. Yes, it's a
But
all
but
winner
what'll
take all.
happen is that person he funds will be a conservative lunatic, like happened in the midterms, where where people didn't appreciate the conservatives. It was it was Mitch McConnell who said the reason we're going to lose the Senate is because of the quality of the candidates. If Elon Musk funds enough candidates that the quality gets so low and we present an agenda, we could take the Senate back. But
Yeah,
if
we
we
just need
don't,
likable candidates that can be relatable. Yeah.
right. Like John Ossoff, I see him and he keeps his commercials are basically this in Georgia. John Ossoff, the Democrat, says Donald Trump or Elon Musk is about to fund Marjorie Taylor Greene to run against me. I am so tired of hearing that. Tell me what you're going to do as a senator. Don't tell me if you lose, Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to be the senator.
Yeah,
Tell me
because
what
she's,
you're going to do if you keep your job for another 6 years.
yeah,
Stop asking me for money. Ask me for my respect. Ask me for my support. Ask me to support your agenda. Stop telling me if you don't have enough money, you're going to lose. Kamala Harris had $1.5 billion. She lost. It's not about money. I really think, and
yeah,
I'm going to prop up my podcast here. Donald Trump made a significant difference in his chance to win the presidency after he spent 3 hours on the podcast with Joe Rogan, because
yeah.
he got to be understood as a person. So tell me, join podcasts, talk to podcasts about what your
Yeah,
political.
Kamala was doing that, but there was so much like distraction and spin on her that she didn't really get a chance to like have that balance. Because even now, when she's running, they're like, where was she as vice president? We never cared about what the vice president was doing because their job is literally to not be visible and be in the background. Nobody's asking where JD Vance is for the last couple months, and nobody asked where you know Mike Pence
Pence
was when he
was.
was VP.
Well,
Yeah,
the problem was they put Kamala Harris in an awful situation. And so with
yeah,
that, I've always mentioned, I don't know what shows people watch and what shows they're watching for the first time. I always mention that I don't think Josh Shapiro, I don't think she picked Tim Walz. I think Josh Shapiro said no to be her vice president because you can't build a presidential campaign in 90 days. And she did a better job of that than anybody else could have. So to
yeah.
say she did a bad job, that's not fair because she did a great job. The problem is that with 90 days to present yourself, a lot of people, especially conservatives, said, I'd rather vote for the devil I know than a person I've never even experienced as in a position of.
And then also the personal bias of picking a woman or a woman of color that also did
Right.
kind of
There was
hurt
that
it as
issue, but
well.
she overcame that. People loved her. There was a lot of support for her.
Yeah,
Her
kind of.
personality shined through. She didn't make that an issue. She never said I'm a black woman, that's why I'm going to lose. I always felt like Hillary made that a part of her agenda. I'm a woman, so I'm up against the law. No,
Yeah,
Kamala
she
Harris
is.
never made that an issue.
Because
She
Hillary
really
already
did.
went through it. Hillary had to walk so Kamala could run.
That's
But
true.
unfortunately, they both were, it's ironic because Donald Trump has run both times going against women. If Kamala had stayed VP and was it Tim Waltz? Was it that was her VP?
Yeah, Tim Walz was
If
her view.
if he had ran, I think he actually could have won.
I think he could have won. I think if Joe Biden didn't run and there was really this big primary, there's this a whole who did the Democrats really want? And somebody prevailed in the primary, whether it was Tim Walz, whether it was Josh Shapiro, whether it was Kamala. And then she had the whole time frame to run as president, to create a
Yeah,
50 state network. But Donald Trump did not win big. People could say he won all 7 swing states. Three of them were by 1.5% or less.
yeah,
And that's the math of politics and presidential elections in the United States. Both candidates, Republican and Democrat, will get to 220 electoral votes. How do you get to set 270? The 7 swing states. Donald Trump won all seven, but he wouldn't have won all seven. He wouldn't have won maybe even two, really, if we had a candidate who was able to win the primary, prevail as the candidate, and run for president, and Donald
equal
Trump would
amount
have
of
been
time. Yeah,
stymied. Yeah.
yeah,
There is
that's
no
cool.
love in America for Donald Trump other than his staunch supporters. There is a feeling of at least he's trying, and there is a feeling of Democrats are getting it really wrong, spending an enormous amount of time telling everybody how bad he's doing things or how wrong he's doing things. We need to get a Democratic Party that's going to present an option that's worth looking at.
I think it's just like him. He's kind of like the wild, like cowboy that just kind of does what he wants, and so that's where, like you're saying, focusing on what he's all doing wrong isn't very helpful because he's gonna do what he wants. So come in another way. That this approach isn't working. And yeah, if Kamala and Tim had more time to, connect with the audience, Trump already had 4 years of direct presidency to go back off of. So he just picked up where he started.
Yeah, he really did. This is this has been your insight's incredible. And like you said, next week we have a little trouble scheduling. So next week or two, we're gonna talk about sexual awareness. April is sex. What is it? Go ahead.
Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month.
Yeah, I just called it sexual awareness. That's not sexual
But it
assault.
is part of it, yeah, sexual
Yeah,
awareness. Because even sex education has a lot to do with sexual assault and awareness. And
right.
so, yeah, the lack of education about our bodies and learning about things, anatomy, like just the basics, that also kind of, contributes to the assault of not understanding how to, accept what your body's going through or the trauma and the mental aspect of going through those type of events. Everybody always says if it was me, I'd do this or I'd do that, but not thinking about the fight or flight or not thinking about, the, pressure, to report, the lack of support or being believed, like there's so many elements that go into that, who you're going up against, So yeah, like it's definitely a topic we can explore more. And
So, we are going to explore it more, and that is going to be the topic. And so, from this moment moving forward till we schedule, I am going to dig deep into the topic. I know
yeah,
you're going to be prepared. You're already very prepared. You're going to dig deeper. When we get together the next time, that is the topic. Today, the topic was education.
yeah, and it's kind
It
of
very,
flowed the way it went. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it very much is a big topic. I always say, I think candidates should spend more time on my forum. You can email me at politicalnobrainer@gmail.com. Tell me what you're running for. Tell me what you want to talk about as an
Oh,
individual,
definitely.
not necessarily a candidate, because we are as Democrats trying to create new candidates, trying to cultivate a whole new candidate petri dish, and I'm trying to be a big part of that on this podcast. So, I would love to see you run for office someday there, Alicia. I think you would be
Well,
great.
fine.
I think you would be great. It's been presented to me. I keep saying, I'm 60 years old. My schedule is kind of a lot already with all the things going on in my life and the podcast, and I have a small business and a full-time job, and um, but I don't know. Maybe I will be a candidate. I haven't ruled it out. I certainly haven't ruled it in. Um, but we are going to do this again very soon. So Lisi, go ahead and tell us about your education, and 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 then just tell us whatever you want to say because we're gonna.
Oh, right now or for the next
Yeah,
time?
no, for
Right now?
yeah, like we're
Okay.
gonna start winding it up. So
I grew up in Michigan. I had parents obviously that were very emphasis on education. I did a lot of volunteering. I did get my CNA nurse aid out of high school. I did that for a couple years while, my biggest love has always been journalism and public relations. So I did try to do nursing, but then I ended up switching to broadcasting. And so I studied broadcasting and communications. Ended up getting my associates at Valencia and then started my communications for bachelor's at UCF, but then decided just to kind of do freelancing and just kind of stick to observation and learning stuff. Some of my hobbies, was volunteering. I do support RAIN and Planned Parenthood. So I do try to kind of learn about the positions and platforms that they're trying to present. I'm trying to think what else. Let's see. I like to joke I put the ass in associates, but yeah, I've had many different careers. I mostly journalism or like healthcare related, like like a certified nurse aide, and then was an intern for a radio show. Did some work with NPR in college.
wow,
So yeah, so And then, I did journalism as well, worked for the newspaper, usually features and things like that, and some freelancing. So your, and your, apostrophe versus plural. So I'm one of those grammar snobs. But
Well,
yeah, that's what.
So you've been, I always pick you for the podcast. You're extremely successful. You've been you're extremely educated. Michigan's one of my favorite places in the world because it's home of the world's biggest Christmas store, Browners.
Yes, I
And I
do go
love
to Bonners.
Christmas. I love Christmas. So,
Oh yeah,
um,
you'll get stuck in there for hours. Literally, if you go, plan to, branch out 4 hours at least.
oh, I will. We're gonna get out there one year. I
Yeah,
can't
it's
wait
about
actually.
40 minutes from my parents' house.
Wow, that's neat.
Yeah, I've been there many times.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, so, um, I think we've really covered a lot. I love when we cover stuff because we really do cover it.
Okay.
I think we agree, and I think we also find a way to disagree respectfully, which is what it's all about.
Yeah, and that's part of
Um,
communication because you shouldn't have to insult somebody to get your point across.
no, no, and I
Yeah.
don't anymore. I was the biggest publisher of Trump diatribe stuff, and I realized, you know what? People love him, love him. You like what he's doing, like what he's doing. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to make Trump out to be a bad guy anymore. I'm trying to tell the Democrats to do a better job of being the good guy, not
Yeah.
just.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, just I mean, let's stop talking about what he's doing wrong because there is a feeling that he's working hard to do something, and we're not right now. We're at a point where we were just talking about what he's doing, and
Yeah, to
that's
me,
not
you
going to
being a
make the
Trump
cut.
supporter doesn't necessarily mean you're a horrible person. It's more about the things you're saying and how you're saying it that really is more telling than your label of being a Trump supporter.
Right,
So
right,
that's the difference between the last election and now. Because before I was just kind of like blanket this, but then, you got to listen to what they're saying. And, like we all grew up differently with different experiences and different types of upbringings and values. And I really don't know what led to the way you feel about what you are saying at this point. So I'm trying to be more understanding as to how you got that position. But then how are we going to take what you're saying and put the humanity back in to make you realize that's more important than the competition and the resentment?
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to be a part of that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I definitely want to be a part of that to get
Yeah,
back
let's
to basics.
learn.
Let's continue to learn because we are. Let's
I
continue to
curved
learn.
my arm so it's not mistaken for a straight arm, just saying.
Oh, right. We still have that controversy building, and everybody's like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we're gonna let that one go too, because what is the point of not letting it go? Is my question anymore. What is the point of talking about it?
Just having a standard, I would want to say. But
I
that
do.
that's
I
a
agree 100%. But I just want to. If you've got people's attention, let's focus on things that really they. If you've got people's attention, let's not focus on the negative. Let's focus on our positives.
but you do want to be mindful of trends and like not and stopping the buck. Because I always say if you let someone shenan, they're gonna shenan again. So it's kind of like you got to nip that in the bud real quickly. Like that's not acceptable. We've moved past that. We don't even want that involved. Just like if Germany themselves in terms of Nazism, they are very strict and have laws and they're just like not for it. But
No, and they
here,
shouldn't be, and we shouldn't be, and
yeah,
we shouldn't tolerate what happened, and we did nip it in the butt because I haven't seen it again, and
not
it's
from
still a
him, but from
topic.
other
It's still
people.
a topic. It certainly is something on my mind. It certainly is a concern of mine, but
Yeah.
I do really want to focus on some real positive agendas for the Democratic Party. If they if they go with them, they go with them. If they create their own, their own. That's fine. If they create their own, let's go with the ones that. But I really want to see some creativity out of the Democratic candidates. Not necessarily what I'm seeing. John
Okay.
Ossoff on the TV commercial one time after another saying the only way I'm going to win is if you give me money. I tend to
Ugh. What are you
disagree.
gonna do with that money? I don't understand. Like, I'm not just gonna throw money at you when I'm already poor, struggling to make a living with the money I do have.
Right. Or
I need
if you're
you to be
gonna
worth my time.
Or if
Yeah.
you, I can imagine if John Ossoff literally got on the next TV commercial and said, "Don't send me money, just vote for me, and send that money you were going to send to me to St. Jude's Children's Hospital," I think he would get a bigger bang for his buck than what he's doing now.
Or even if he had them, designate the money to an organism that support or organization, excuse me, that supports one of his main causes. Like,
Right.
if I were to run per se, I would be like, listen, don't send money to me, send money to RAIN to find more support for victims of assault and spread more awareness, because I would like to present the platform that if you are convicted of assault of this type, blah, 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 that you have a mandatory minimum sentence of this. We need to punish offenders more. That would be a direct correlation with,
To your candidacy.
yeah, exactly. Something like that. Or even if I, was like, we need to be able to do better with healthcare, organizations. And I say, hey, give money to this organization because they provide scholarships and grants and funding for people who are underinsured or can't afford their medications. There's so
And
many
that's a
loopholes
great
in
example
healthcare.
of how let's stop the $2 billion being spent on billboards and Facebook snippets and radio commercials. Let's focus on the candidate saying just that. Send the money
Yeah.
you're going to send to me to RAIN. Send the money you're going to send to me to, uh, you know, an
American
organization.
Heart Association, or
Right. Oh,
American
it has
Cancer
to be
Society. Yeah.
worthwhile. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I love
Yeah, because
that.
healthcare is another thing that is another topic, just even the experiences I've had since, my battle with cancer and my transplant. That is a whole world that got opened up to me. That is a lot. Very
And I do want to
overwhelming.
have that conversation. I want you to be comfortable with it. Whenever you, first, well, we are at this
Yeah.
point. We do have another scheduled session. We will
Okay.
schedule it. We do have another schedule plan, another session planned,
Yeah.
and that next session planned will be sexual assault awareness. That will be the topic. So look
Okay.
for us. And thank you. And
You're
like, share,
welcome.
subscribe, comment. I love having you on. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time. I really appreciate you. I do look forward to you being a political candidate someday, and I'm going to continue to harp on that point as we progress. Thank
I
you,
might run as a
Lisi.
libertarian.
That's all right. My good friend Daryl Blackwell, I believe, is a libertarian, and I believe in it too. I believe there's a balance. We do need government in certain things, but we also don't need them in certain things.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisi. All right, have a great day. Like, share, subscribe, comment. You're listening to Political No Brainer, the podcast where we move past winner takes all politics and into the conversations like the one Lisi and I just had, a constructive conversation, not a negative, browbeating conversation, a constructive session. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye, Lisi.